Final predictions for the men's and women's Royal Rumble this weekend. And the WWE transfer portal has familiar faces in new places. It's time to roll around the ring. All right, the Royal Rumble is this Saturday, Indianapolis, believe it or not. And as I talked about in the past, the men's Royal Rumble match absolutely stacked. I think it has the possibility of being one of, if not the greatest that we've ever seen. But of course, the final show before the Rumble, and we got to get predictions in here, starting with that men's match. And the names are just top to bottom. And what makes it so great is, as I said last week, you can give me a reason why so many different names could and should win this and then end up in a world title match come WrestleMania. But I'm giving this year's to CM Punk. I think CM Punk, there was a possibility for him to win it last year. I know he ended up getting injured. I thought there was a route for him to win it just coming back to WWE. The headline was there. And of course, the biggest thing would have been his match with Seth Rollins, who was champion at the time. Now, CM Punk winning this match will give him a title shot, and maybe you would think a Cody Rhodes feud, but you also got to remember WrestleMania is a little further back in the year. The end of April, which means the road to WrestleMania is a little bit longer. And I think Punk wins this Royal Rumble match. And I think there's enough time for Gunther, even though he just retained that title against Jey Uso at Saturday night's main event. I think there's enough time for him to drop that world title to a Seth Rollins between now and WrestleMania. It doesn't need to be right away. He can still hold it for another month or so, but I think that would give him enough of a run to make it okay for him to drop it. And it would set up CM Punk to challenge Seth Rollins for the world title. First, focusing in on Gunther. I don't know that hurts Gunther. I know the top two matches people want to see and are, speculating are Goldberg, who we've already seen a face-off between those two, or Brock Lesnar for WrestleMania. And I think either of those two facing Gunther come WrestleMania, that a title does not need to be involved. And I would prefer that it's not involved. Not saying Gunther would lose that match if there was a title involved, but I just don't think the story needs it. We don't need Brock Lesnar or Goldberg in a world title conversation in 2025. So I think a match between Gunther and Goldberg or Gunther and Brock Lesnar with no title involved, just one-on-one, man-to-man, obviously with characters like that and men like that, it tells the story itself with no title needed. And then it gives CM Punk a route to get that rematch with Seth Rollins at WrestleMania, maybe a heel Seth Rollins. I know we've speculated maybe a group with Drew McIntyre and or Kevin Owens because of all their gripes with the bloodline being so similar. Either way, I think a Punk Royal Rumble win would be the route to go to set up a rematch with Seth Rollins, who should be world champion come WrestleMania time. And that can also tell the story and connect a fun story with Roman and The Rock, who should be a one-on-one match, also not needing a title come WrestleMania. CM Punk has brought up time and time again that favor that Paul Heyman owes him, and you would have to think it would involve him getting that title match and title win at WrestleMania. And that would automatically tie in Roman Reigns to this story. And we know the history that Roman and Punk have as of late, but also the history that Roman and Seth Rollins have. So then you tie in the story with Roman telling his story with The Rock, but also getting involved with Seth and CM Punk because of Paul Heyman's involvement. And you have another overbooked in a good way storytelling build leading into this year's WrestleMania, kind of the way we saw last year come together with The Rock and Seth and Cody and so on. And as for Cody's title match come WrestleMania, I am still on the bandwagon of Cody Rhodes versus Randy Orton come WrestleMania. Of course, the history is there. I'm okay with Cody continuing to stay away from the bloodline. Orton might be a Royal Rumble return. I don't obviously have him winning it, but I think Randy Orton and turning on Cody Rhodes once he's done with his Kevin Owens feud at some point between now and WrestleMania will be the route for Cody's title picture come WrestleMania. But CM Punk getting this win for a rematch with Seth Rollins is the route I would go heading into WrestleMania in Vegas. We also have the women's Royal Rumble match, and really not much build to this. The entire build for this match took place in one night on SmackDown. They confirmed that Charlotte Flair returning will be in that Royal Rumble match, and then Liv Morgan and, join Nia Jax and Bayley. And then it was Bianca and Naomi, and one after the other. We just kind of forced everyone to declare for the Royal Rumble in one night. I really wish there was some more build to this Royal Rumble match. So there were stories, right? Like, so you could go one to the other, kind of like we said with the men's, why this person should win, why this person should win, the story here, the story there. There's not much stories as much as there are big names. Bianca's a big name, and there's former world champions in there, of course, but there's not much story there, which is why, and I mentioned it last week, Charlotte Flair versus Tiffany Stratton at WrestleMania is the route I would go for Tiffany's women's title, and the only one that I can see making sense in terms of story winning this year's Royal Rumble, I hate to say it, is a returning Charlotte Flair. I think that instantly puts Flair back where she wants to be when she returns, and I think it sets up a perfect feud for Tiffany Stratton as champion. I will reiterate what I said last week. Tiffany should retain at WrestleMania against Charlotte. Yes, I'm putting Charlotte back in the title picture. I don't have Charlotte winning this title, but there's just no other stories within this Rumble. Bianca's most likely telling a story with Jade, if that story goes the way we think it is. And then Liv Morgan and Nia Jax both just lost their titles. So for them to win the Rumble and just get them right back into the title picture, Nia just lost to Rhea at Saturday night's main event. So that would just kind of feel like reiterating that story. Naomi would be a feel-good story. I'm with it. But do we really see Naomi defeating Rhea Ripley or Tiffany Stratton at WrestleMania? I don't. I wouldn't go that route, so I wouldn't waste her winning the Rumble just to lose at WrestleMania because of how loved she is. And of course, she's still also entangled in the Bianca story and what could be with Jade Cargill. So unless there is another surprise return that we don't know about that could end up surprising us and winning this thing, I got to go with a returning Charlotte Flair to get this win. On Raw, back to the men's Royal Rumble match, Sami Zayn declaring for the Royal Rumble. One of a couple, Shinsuke Nakamura as well, but specifically the Sami Zayn segment on Raw saw Kevin Owens show up, and those two finally crossed paths with Kevin Owens on his heel run leading into his ladder match with Cody Rhodes. And KO says he's not mad at Sami Zayn and kind of tries to guilt him into helping him come Royal Rumble, win the world title from Cody Rhodes, and then talk about Sami Zayn winning the Royal Rumble himself, and those two can main event WrestleMania together for the world title. I obviously wouldn't go that route, but I think there is legitimate reason to consider Sami Zayn actually doing this. I will reiterate that WrestleMania is a little further back. You can get away with Cody dropping this title and then getting it back before WrestleMania if you want him to be champion going into Mania in Vegas. I would go the route of Sami Zayn helping out Kevin Owens at Royal Rumble, turning heel and helping KO get this title. And I need it for Sami Zayn. I have been preaching for the last couple of years since Sami Zayn left his original run from the Bloodline that he needs a spark. I am kind of sick, and I love Sami Zayn, but I am sick of the mopey, emotional, angsty, always sad Sami Zayn giving the same inspirational speech every week. And again, I say this because I love Sami Zayn, and I say this because we've seen what he can do as an obnoxious heel with Kevin Owens, as a lovable babyface or lovable heel with the Bloodline, as a goofy comedic character as a babyface or a heel. And I thought his return to the Bloodline for War Games this past year would give him that spark. And you see hints of it here and there, but it never really came through. And he's right back to being the same type of overly emotional guy every single week. I need something new for Sami Zayn, and if it's not the return to the Bloodline that's going to give him that spark, maybe it's going heel again with his best friend and Kevin Owens. I think there's legitimate reason why it would be a good idea for Sami Zayn to turn heel, help Kevin Owens, shock the world, take the title off Cody at Royal Rumble. I wouldn't go as far as those two main eventing WrestleMania together as they talked about and as they mentioned on Raw. And there's plenty of time for Cody to get that title back before WrestleMania. I think it's best for Sami Zayn, and Kevin Owens, no doubt on this run, deserves that win. Also moving over to Raw, Bayley declared for the Royal Rumble, moved over to Raw from SmackDown. They made a big deal about it with Adam Pearce, and it was very awkward, though, on Raw for them to make such a big deal about Bayley coming over and then losing clean to Nia Jax. And Bayley in the women's division, I kind of put her in the same stratosphere as I just talked about with Sami Zayn. In the men's division is, what do we do with her? She was just heel. We can't just turn her back heel, and I don't know that anyone wants her to be a world champion again. And do we go the route of her winning the Rumble again? I don't. Bayley needs something, right? She has lost time and time again, lost her title shot against Tiffany Stratton. The move to Raw is new, But again, losing clean to Nia kind of took the spark and momentum away from something new for Bayley in that realm. I think you need to go all in on this feud with Roxanne Perez. It is brand new for Bayley, and I think that's what she needs. She needs something new, something different. Again, turning her heel, she just was with Damage Control just over a year ago. She was just in the world title picture and won the Rumble last year. There's not much else you can do with her on the main roster right now, with everything else going on in the women's division leading into the Royal Rumble and then WrestleMania. So her going all in on this Roxanne Perez feud, that could be a WrestleMania weekend match, and she can just kind of almost a passing of the torch type of vibe with Roxanne Perez and setting up for someone in Roxanne Perez who is going to be a main roster staple in the women's division very soon, and her having that feud with Bayley, whether she wins or lose WrestleMania weekend. And I personally would have Bayley get that win. It's something new for Bayley. It's a great Kickstarter for Roxanne Perez to come up to the main roster full time at some point this year. You need to give that Bayley that brand new look, all in on that Roxanne Perez feud, and leave her at that. More transfer portal moves, and on SmackDown, Damian Priest, The Miz too, which was a lot of fun to see him try to make some friends, and they had a lot of fun in the comedic role with Miz moving to SmackDown. But Damian Priest coming over to SmackDown this after defeating Finn Balor in that awesome street fight on Raw a couple of weeks ago. And I love this move for Damian Priest. Step one is to get him away from the Judgment Day, specifically Finn Balor. We all talked about how that feud kind of went a little too long. He challenged Gunther a couple times, could not get that world title back. You need to give him something new. And Raw on Netflix, since the move to Netflix, has been overpowered with a bunch of the highest stars, which means some of the mid-card near the top of the world title talent like Damian Priest was going to get lost in the shuffle. And you also need SmackDown to continue to have a little bit of star power to be interesting week in and week out with how much attention Raw is getting every week moving over to Netflix. Damian Priest moving to SmackDown, there's a lot more room on SmackDown for a star like him to flourish and become and continue to grow as the star he was becoming since breaking off from the Judgment Day. It gives him something new. It gives him more room to grow potentially in the world title picture or the U.S. title picture with Shinsuke. There's a lot more different things you can do with Damian Priest, which will only build his character. Think 2002, when that brand split initially happened. They put all the biggest names on Raw because Raw continues to be that flagship show. Although that left a lot of room for growing stars to continue to grow on SmackDown. Rey Mysterio, Edge, sorry to say the name, Chris Benoit, right? Like Eddie Guerrero, the Guerreros, like the SmackDown Six as they were known. Those were not big names in WWE at the time. They were just below main event status, kind of like Damian Priest is. And they went to SmackDown where there was more room to grow, and they became bigger stars and obviously went on to be world champions. But SmackDown specifically was the better show for a good portion of the early 2000s after the brand split because of young stars like that. Damian Priest, not young, although right there on the precipice of being a main event star, could have that same type of effect on SmackDown and for his career. So I absolutely love this move to SmackDown for him. And on SmackDown, it was announced 2 out of 3 falls at Royal Rumble for the tag titles, DIY, Motor City Machine Guns. I mean, short and sweet. This is going to be awesome. It should be the first match of the night. It's a perfect 4 guys to put out there, kick off the show with a hot start. I would not start with a Royal Rumble match. I know they normally do with them having 2. I would have this match go on first. 2 out of 3 falls. They can get the crowd going. These are 4 of the best in rings, especially in the tag team division. And I would keep it with DIY. As much as I love the Motor City Machine Guns, you don't just put the titles back on them after making this whole big deal about DIY turning heel. There's still more story to be told within that SmackDown tag division with Pretty Deadly. Keep the titles on DIY, but I love this match as an opener for the Royal Rumble. Moving over to AEW, and the Death Rider storyline continues, and the struggles with this storyline continues. Criticism on social media continues, and this is really just killing the world title picture for AEW right now. And it's nothing necessarily specifically against Jon Moxley. It's just the writing behind it, and more specifically, the lack of progression. What is the point? Where are we going with this? We saw the end of Dynamite after the Cope Pack match, and another Death Riders beatdown. We have reiterated that same segment over and over again. They come out, They lay out somebody in the back. They do some obnoxious beatdown in the back to be edgy, and then they take out Cope and them, and then they run through the crowd. We have reiterated that segment for the last 4 to 5 weeks, if not longer, with no progression. Do we really care that much about the Rock and Roll Express and AEW and them getting taken out? FTR isn't back in this feud, and again, they're just overly pushed in this. Do we really care that much about them? And we, again, still don't know who the point is. What is the point? Is it Adam Copeland in the world title picture? All due respect to Cope, he's 51. And he kind of looked like it in his match with Pac, and it's no disrespect to him. It's just, is that the point of your world title picture right now? What are we doing with this? It's the same thing over and over again. Are we just doing all this to drag out a Bryan Danielson return for when? This is just reiterating over and over again. And all the while, Christian Cage has this contract for the world title and is nowhere to be found in this world title picture anymore. Darby Allin still not around. At this point, whatever world title match you do with Mox and Cope, I would not wait for a Danielson return. Put this title on Christian Cage. That faction is a lot more interesting and a lot more legs to a story than anything they've done with the Death Riders. I think they've written this right out of interest to the AEW fan base. You need to pivot. You need to pivot now. And the easiest pivot is to get Christian Cage to cash in and take that world title. All due respect to Mox. Speaking of the AEW world title picture, Jeff Jarrett is claiming he wants to be AEW world champion. And look, this is not a knock on Jeff Jarrett, his final AEW contract, and he wants some type of final run, but this also does not help that world title picture, and I don't know that it's at all believable that Jeff Jarrett is in a world title picture like AEW in 2025. What is the point of this, right? I mean, we're going as far, and everything else that we have going on in the Mox story, at some point you would think this match is going to happen. I mean, he's invested in a feud with MJF, who has also regressed and continued to regress in his character work. What happened to his feud with Adam Cole? Adam Cole is now just back with the Undisputed Kingdom, and just looking at Daniel Garcia in the TNT title picture, that feud did not seem to be done at World's End, and they have just seemingly moved on from that. And now MJF is in a full feud with Jeff Jarrett in 2025. I respect the fact that Jeff wants one final run, and I respect the fact that he does have a bit of a fan base and still a support system in the wrestling world for this final run. I think the perfect route to go with Jeff Jarrett is that ROH world title. He could be in the spot that Chris Jericho was in, and people would be more into it. People, of course, are not loving how much Chris Jericho has been shoved down our throats by AEW storytelling and constantly having the gold. No one is feeling this learning tree angle, and I feel like for the emotional sense, Jeff Jarrett wanting this final run and wanting one last final title run, or at least to be in the picture, would make a lot more sense in the ROH world title picture. The AEW world title picture, as I just talked about, way too convoluted already. Don't know the direction they're going, and to have Jeff Jarrett on the side screaming that he wants a title as well, I just don't see it in 2025. I don't see anyone getting behind this. I feel like it's a waste of MJF's time in terms of his character work and where it's gone since he returned to AEW last summer, and everything that happened with Adam Cole, and now he's just right to Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett deserves one final run. That's fine. ROH is where it should be. A Jeff Jarrett Jericho match leading to a Jeff Jarrett ROH title run. That's fine. Keep him away from the AEW world title picture at this point. Something that should be your AEW world title picture, Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega. A phenomenal segment to kick off Dynamite, setting up a tag match with Kyle Fletcher and Konosuke Takeshita come Grand Slam in Australia. And again, everything about that segment felt star power. This is where your world title should live, on Ospreay or Omega, and in this feud with Takeshita and Fletcher. I would go as far as to say that the Don Callis family, in terms of the story they're telling, the talent they have in there, they are more of a formidable heel faction than Moxley's Death Riders have become. The world title picture, the stars, the face, the top names of AEW are right here. This is your top men's story right now in AEW, and that segment, and of course the stunt that Ospreay and Omega pulled off, Omega being back, the alliance between Omega and Ospreay, and the history those two have and how long that will last, and again the up and coming rising stars of Takeshita, who has the title, and Kyle Fletcher, who should in the near future. They have handled Kyle Fletcher's solo run very well. Don Callis is a very much hated heel, and that's fine. They got the muscle and Brian Cage and Lance Archer. They're hinting at even more people being added to that group. That is a much more interesting, formidable heel faction that AEW has going on in the men's division more than the Death Riders. I would love to see the world title in this picture because this is the top thing going in the AEW men's division right now. I love the tag match coming up at Grand Slam. And as I mentioned in the past, it's huge for Kyle Fletcher to be right in the middle of this on a big card with names like Ospreay and Omega. His stock continues to rise. I love everything about this segment. I love everything about this story. Handling Omega's return perfectly without rushing him to that Okada match that everyone is waiting for. This is being handled with perfection for AEW's men's division. And shout out to the Hurt Syndicate, Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin winning the tag titles. I will say, and something we say about AEW a lot, I would have held off a little bit, right? Build up to it a little bit. Private Party just got these tag titles. I would have let them hold the titles for a little bit longer, tell this story with Lashley and Benjamin, and maybe give it to them at Revolution in March. But that being said, I'm all for it. The Hurt Syndicate, they've been around for a few months. I'm talking October, and they haven't really done much. Knowing how over this faction was with MVP, Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin in WWE, how upset fans were that it kind of got cut short, at least the way they felt. And then when they came over to AEW, felt, okay, this is their time to shine, and they haven't done that. So how do you instantly make their faction look legitimate? Put gold on them, and they don't yet have a third member, at least full-time wrestling member. So Lashley and Benjamin holding the tag titles is the perfect route to go to kind of elevate this faction again. Lashley did beat Swerve. They've kind of dropped that story for reasons that are being rumored and speculated, and we won't do that here. But if that story is on hold for now, or if and when it ever comes back, if you're not doing that right now, you need to make sure this faction in the Hurt Syndicate continues to look strong. Gold automatically does just that. I love this move. So shout out to the Hurt Syndicate getting that big win on Dynamite. Something else I'm loving going into AEW Grand Slam, Toni Storm and Mariah May and the return of timeless Toni Storm. That took place on Collision during that face-to-face, and I loved everything about it. I mean, this is the top character work when it comes to the women's division. We've talked about that with Toni Storm coming out as the rookie who forgot about Mariah May. But I will say something I just said about AEW that we say a lot, and that is, I would have held off. I loved everything about this segment. I love the shock value of it. I did. But we still have a few weeks before this match. I would not have mind building to this, kind of showing hints and signs of her breaking back in to the timeless character, or taking a couple more beatings from Mariah May, but smiling about it, and Mariah not knowing why. There was ways to build into this to maybe have it happen right before Grand Slam, maybe at Grand Slam, because I don't think Mariah May should drop the title to Toni Storm, and for her to jump right back into this timeless character just to potentially take a loss at Grand Slam, I don't love it. And I don't love Mariah May dropping that title. A loss could have snapped her back into this timeless character and kind of done more wonders for Toni Storm and her character work. But that being said, everything about this segment was handled well. Toni Storm continues to be top level character work on AEW TV, specifically for that women's division, which is desperately needed, because outside of Mariah May's title run and Toni Storm's character work, the rest of that division has been quiet. It has been struggling, and Toni Storm continues to be a rare bright spot for AEW's women's division. One other bright spot from the women's division, Harley Cameron. We have to shout her out. She has 100% come into her own in terms of what she is good at, how she can get over, and how she can stay relevant in the women's division. And she is all over it, right? She is funny. She can sing. She can play the guitar. She's not the best in the ring, but when you have that much talent somewhere else, you can kind of tie it all together to make it make sense. She's challenging Mercedes Moné for a TBS title shot come Grand Slam in Australia, of course, where she is from. So yes, do it. I am not jumping to have Harley Cameron be a champion, defeat Mercedes Moné. Don't do it, right? She is a lovable comedy character. She can get upset wins here and there. Don't overpush her, right? We don't want to ruin what we have here. Harley Cameron has been around for a while in AEW and just kind of has been floating around as people's managers and within the women's division. She's finally found her shtick. And believe it or not, winning gold would take away from that. Let her do what she does. Put her in some good matches, make her be that lovable character that loses a little bit. We feel for her. We continue to root for her. We laugh with her. We sing with her. We do all that with her. She is perfect at all of that. She is as entertaining as it gets for that women's division. Harley Cameron has 100% found her spot in that AEW women's division to get consistent TV time. She is flourishing in it. And again, gold would actually take away from it. But that being said, yes, she should challenge Mercedes Moné at Grand Slam in Australia. And 3 quick things from TNA Genesis from last weekend as they continue to rise as a company, starting with, of course, Joe Hendry getting that world title win over Nick Nemeth. I was very vocal a few months ago in terms of him dropping that first title shot against Nick Nemeth. It felt like he should have struck when the iron was hot. He is still hot right now. He is still popular within the wrestling industry, so he needed to win it here. He's the perfect face for that company and where they're at right now. The deal with WWE, the popularity growing, his popularity kicks all that off. We talked to the Hardy Boys about that. He is the perfect guy to kind of be the face of the company, the champion of that company. So I love that move. Also, Josh Alexander, yes, lost an I Quit match to Mike Santana, but now they're starting to tell this story of him quitting TNA. And it's, very evident it's happening a few weeks before the Royal Rumble. I would keep an eye out for him to be a surprise entrant in the men's Royal Rumble match come Indianapolis to continue to tell that story of him potentially quitting TNA. And then Tessa Blanchard, and we've kind of brought this up in the past, not a great look when you have a chant of "she's a racist" being thrown her way. As I just mentioned, there's a lot of good going on in TNA right now. They are on the rise. They have a new deal with WWE, and the wrestling world does not respond well to her, and for good reason. And when you have the reasoning behind it, it is not a good look to continue to push her the way they have in the women's division, near the top of their women's division. There's a lot of good things in TNA. There's a lot of good things from Genesis, but when you mix in there a "she's a racist" chant as loud as ever in the middle of this red hot pay-per-view, that's not the type of look or publicity TNA needs right now as they continue to grow and potentially, as I mentioned last week, could grow in the coming years to the number 2 company in the wrestling industry. A storyline, an angle like this will only hold you back just a little bit. Pushing her the way they are, not the right move for that women's division and that company as a whole. Roar Around the Ring is available every week. Find us on YouTube at Roar Around the Ring. I'm Justin Valentine. We'll talk to you guys very soon.